All right, welcome everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is the 135th meeting that we've had consecutively. Thank you all for joining us and for ringing in the new year for this very important mission that we've all taken on. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as Dennis Small, the co-moderator. And I like to remind people every meeting, especially as we're starting this new year, why we created this forum 135 weeks ago, which was to unite the international peace movement. Whatever philosophies you're coming from, language you speak, religion you practice, nation, culture, wherever you're coming from, if you are for true peace on the planet, then you are welcome here. And just be aware that we do not all agree, which is a good thing. Many of our enemies, I'm sure as you're aware, have been trying to keep various different groups from working together. And if we're actually going to stop a thermonuclear world war, a genocide, many other problems on the planet, then we actually need to collaborate together and coordinate our activities. So I'd like to say thank you to all of the people who have been veterans in this process, and also welcome new people who are joining us for the first time. Please take a moment to share this invitation with your organizations, your friends, your reasonable enemies, and invite them on for this discussion today, because this is very important. There are a lot of very breaking, breathtaking events that have taken place, which have definitely thrusted us into a pretty dangerous situation for world war. It keeps growing and growing at this point. And we need to continue to coordinate our activities. So please invite as many people on today as possible. To start us off today, we have Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Please go ahead, Helga.
Well, first, a good new year to all of you. If you thought that the year 2025 was tumultuous, ridden with dangers, and many absolutely unbelievable things people did not imagine were possible, the new year clearly continues like that and promises that 2026 will be a year of even more dramatic changes, for the very simple reason that the whole strategic situation and many elements in it are stretched so much to the utmost that we have to expect certain things not to continue, but to go into disruptive developments. And then everything will depend on, do we have in place enough forces of reason in order to prevent that any one of these conflicts goes into a global conflagration. So I think the dominating new development, which I think is really incredibly that it can happen like that, is the events around the drone attacks on the residence of President Putin in some little city near Novgorod, Valdai, where basically immediately following the discussions in Mar-a-Lago between Trump and Zelensky, there was an attack. 91 drones were in the direction of this residence, which also, as all residences of the Russian president, contains a nuclear command center. And according to Russian military officials, all of these drones were neutralized. No damage was inflicted. But the implication of this is absolutely incredibly of the highest strategic importance, because if President Putin would have been there, if he would have been killed, the world would probably be in a spiral of open-ended to World War III already. But then the developments which occurred around this are equally hair-raising. First of all, the sequence of events was that President Putin did call President Trump and informed him about what happened. Trump had an initial reaction where he said that he was completely shocked, that he could not even imagine that such an insane attack would take place. But basically, the the statement then was by Putin was that in face of this clear fact of state terrorism, that Russia has to reassess its position and that a Russian reaction would be unavoidable. And Trump, according to Ushakov, said that fortunately the US did not give the Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Then naturally the Ukraine government dismissed and denied that any such attack took place. They said there was some attack against the military facility in the vicinity of that residence, but no attack on the residence was planned. Then naturally all the Western medias only covered the Ukrainian version, that this was all made up by the Russians, supposedly to get out of the peace process, which is a completely ridiculous argument, because Putin already had said that if the negotiations fail, that Russia will accomplish the same aim by military means on the battlefield. So they have left no doubt, where their direction is going to. Then, in an absolutely traumatic development, the CIA, that is Mr. Radcliffe and his organization, also said there was no attack. This was all made up by the Russians. And whereupon Scott Ritter then basically said that this was absolutely unbelievable. And I don't know if we have a video clip by Ritter on this program for today or not. He was traveling and therefore not available himself. Naturally, this puts Trump into a complete pickle, because either the CIA was right or the Russians were right, and he has somehow to make up his mind and find out. Now then, on January 1st, the Russian Ministry of Defense, in the person of its US of a spokesman called Igor Kostyukov, chief of the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces in Russia, presented the evidence for this attack to the US military attaché in Moscow, where they said that they got several drones which were shot down during the attack, which had their navigation systems well preserved. And in several of these drones, one could see not only the directionality of the, maybe you can put in the video clip or the map to illustrate this, that not only could you see the routes where these drones were coming from, but that you could also detect who was programming them. So basically, this is now evidence which has been presented, and therefore will be subject to exact investigation. But it puts a very big problem to President Trump, because as I said, either the Russian evidence turns out to be true, then that's one thing. Then the question is, did the CIA not know? Did they make a mistake? I mean, such things happen, mistakes are being made, or did they lie? In any case, it puts President Trump in front of the urgent task that he has to put his house in order and get this clarified, because on that hangs the entire Ukraine negotiations, the entire question of, can this be solved diplomatically or not? I don't think it looks very good right now, because the other thing which happened was that on midnight from Sylvester, the New Year's Eve, to the New Year, exactly at 12 o'clock, there was an attack on a little town in Cherson called Korli, where some civilian people, families with children, and no official military at all, at least not on any high ranking level, were celebrating New Year's Eve and the beginning of the new year by watching the TV address of President Putin to address the nation, on that occasion. And while they were watching, there was a drone attack which killed several dozen people, maybe 24 or more, injuring many more. And obviously, Kiev immediately denied that they did that. How they can deny that is pretty difficult to imagine, but they did. So that was then commented by a wide range of Russian officials, where government spokeswoman Zakharova pointed to the fact that the absolute sadistic element of that, to target families celebrating New Year who had absolutely nothing to do with the conflict. They are civilians. And obviously this is aggravating the situation to the hilt. The international echo to all of these events was very, very sharp, naturally. China, Brazil, India, many other spokesmen and leaders from the global south took the position of Russia. The Western media unisono said this is a Russian invention. Maria Zakharova noted the fact that also the response by the Western forces to the attack on Korli was complete silence, saying that this long line of condoning terrorism committed by the Ukrainians that is continued now for many years, and it shows the absolute inhuman bias of Western forces in light of state terrorism. So I think this is an unbelievable serious situation, because I mean, if just imagine if the attack would have been successful and the Russian president would be dead by now. I mean, I can only venture to imagine how that would have exploded an already extremely tense strategic situation to a possible point of no return. So this is not going to go away. I think this has to be investigated. It has to be clarified until the conclusions are drawn and the world situation is determined by that. Now, just to mention it, there are many other crisis spots which unfortunately underline the fact that the strategic situation in the coming year will be one of absolute danger, turmoil. And one of them is that the situation in the Middle East remains and is actually getting more dangerous. Not only is the killing in Gaza and the West Bank continuing, but also after the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu in Mar-a-Lago on New Year, he was the only foreign guest there. The likelihood that it will come to another military operation against Iran is unfortunately very, very big. And obviously, this would really escalate the world into another absolute catastrophe. Also, Venezuela, there were 5 more boats shot down, I think 100 people more killed. This situation absolutely remains one of potential complete destabilization of the Latin American continent. The situation around between China and Japan remains extremely tense following the Chinese military maneuver around Taiwan. And it just underlines all of these crises, underline the fact that we absolutely need to change the entire paradigm. Also, and we will hear from Mr. Effenberger more lengthily about that. The German situation remains one of hair-raising danger. Not only is the military armament fully going on, the militarization, both in Japan and Germany, interestingly enough, two of the former Axis powers are in the same mentality and mindset. But the pending installation of medium-range nuclear-capable missiles in Germany will make Germany an immediate prime target of any retaliation coming from Russia. And I think we should really have an international mobilization that these missiles must not be deployed, because the Russians have to assume that they are nuclear equipped if they are nuclear capable. So all of these situations underline the absolute urgent need to put in earnest on the agenda the international security and development architecture proposal, which is a realistic possibility given the fact that China is pushing the global governance initiative, which is practically the same thing like our proposal for an international security and development architecture. And the willingness of the global south, of the BRICS, of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization countries to cooperate with the West, if we so decide, is absolutely clear. And this was very powerfully reiterated by President Xi Jinping in his New Year's address, where he again said, China has opened its arms wide to embrace the entire world. And I think we would be absolutely insane in the West if we don't respond to that and stop geopolitics and go into a new paradigm of cooperation instead of confrontation. So I'm absolutely certain that the coming year, 2026, will be one of strategic decisions which probably will decide about will the human species make it or not. Because the other major danger, which is naturally hanging over the heads of the whole world, is the pending collapse of the Western financial system, the AI bubble, the crypto market, which already suffered massive losses, but which is peanuts to what could happen. So the need to have a new security and development architecture, for which I wrote 10 principles as food for thought, which includes emphatically the 4 laws of Lyndon LaRouche to reorganize a completely bankrupt financial system, is more urgently than ever. So these are my opening remarks, and till soon.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Helga, for that really hair-raising overview of what's happening in the world. It's very important to situate our discussion today from that standpoint.
Es muy importante. Gracias por esos comentarios para ayudar a situar.
Spanish interpreter into the Spanish channel, please.
Carlos, no tienes canal de inglés.
Could the Dave, could Carlos?
No, ya estoy.
Carlos, hold on. Dave, could Carlos Potes be made into an interpreter if he hasn't been yet? Carlos, you need to go into the Spanish channel, please.
Okay, yes. Yeah, it looks like I'm not set yet.
Okay, we'll do that. Someone else should take over until then.
Okay,
go
ahead.
Okay, I'll continue then. And then just so people know, I've included in the chat, if you're on over the Zoom, the map that we displayed from the Russian Ministry of Defense on the drone attacks, as well as the 10 principles of a new security and development architecture that Helga has put forward. So please check those out. So we'll continue with our discussion. It's a great pleasure to have you on again, Wolfgang Effenberger. He's a journalist, prominent journalist, and author of Pax Americana, and also The Underestimated Power. And thank you so much for joining us, Wolfgang Effenberger. We really do appreciate your expertise and your thoughtfulness that you're bringing to the table. Please go ahead, you have the floor.
Am 8. November 2021 wurde erstmals nach Ende des Kalten Krieges das 56. US-Artilleriekommando reaktiviert. Es war 1983 im Rahmen der Pershing-II-Stationierung aufgestellt worden und nach dem Kalten Krieg
We
1991
are,
Have the
excuse me,
German
we are not getting interpretation into English, please, German interpreters. Do we have an interpreter?
Ja, natürlich, ja. Am 8. November 2000. Am 8. November.
So no, okay.
8. November
On 8th of November 2021, for the first time after the end of the Cold War, the 65th Artillery Command has been reactivated. A big US command in Wiesbaden in Germany, and this commando is under a two-star general, which is not common for us for artillery command. In November 2021, he said the reactivation of this 56 artillery command, which was in the 80s, when the Pershing rockets have been missiles have been stationed. This will give Europe and Germany big opportunities for all kinds of operations, and furthermore the synchronization for multinational operations and to implement and to implement these operation capabilities. When I heard this, I wrote an article where I talked about this reactivation of this new command and the resulting dangers. After the reunification of Germany and the end of the Cold War, this command in June 1991 has been deactivated. Now, 30 years later, to reactivate it is part of the new strategic concept of the USA against Russia. There have been press reports about the reactivation of this. In February 2022, an administration leader in Wiesbaden has been asked by the press what role these soldiers, the US soldiers in Wiesbaden, will have in light of the coming Dark Eagle missile system. The defense minister of Germany at this time, Mrs. Lambrecht, wrote that she understands that the population is occupied or that doesn't like that stationing, but she reassured us that this wouldn't be so bad. And this has also been said by Andreas Michaelis, the state secretary. He said the federal government has received from the US government that no missile systems will be stationed there at this artillery command in Wiesbaden, and that there are no intentions will be to station missiles there. on the 10th of July 2024, the Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany has given his okay to station these missiles. These systems will be given to that artillery command in Wiesbaden. It will be the SM-6 missile. It's a defense missile with a range of 370 to 500 kilometers. And another system in 2029, a hypersonic missile system will come 2029. Then the Tomahawk missile, it can intrude into enemy territory, deeply into it at low altitude, and can attack radar systems, for example. Nuclearly capable variants are not in use anymore since 2013. And third, the new system Dark Eagle, which is currently in development, which will have a range of 2,700 kilometers and can fly at Mach 5, which is hypersonic, and also at low altitude. These systems make it possible that Germany can attack Russian targets deep into its territory and also command structures. Therefore, Russia would be blinded by these attacks and would be put under pressure. Also, intercontinental missiles can attack missile silos of Russia. The nuclear strategic balance will be changed, and it will threaten Russia. This is not to deter Russia, as Biden and Scholz lied, but it will just make the situation worse. This is a dramatic endangerment of the current security, not only for Europe. With Dark Eagle, one of the new 3 weapon systems, we have a much bigger danger to be annihilated in Germany. And Dark Eagle, for example, can fly up to Mach 17 and can fly other routes as opposed to Pershing 2. And it's hard to predict how it will fly, how it will actually attack, because it can spread. Also, targets which are not in a bunker. Therefore, it doesn't need a nuclear or a specially hardened explosive, which would be possible. Putin, when he was just ahead to invade Ukraine, said that it's bad for Russia if Ukraine will be a member of NATO. He said at that time, just before Russia came into Ukraine, that ballistic rockets from Ukraine only need 7 to 8 minutes. That's like the knife to the throat. And Dark Eagle makes this situation even worse. How could this have been possible? One asks. The INF Treaty is a historic treaty, 4 years, which has been established 4 years after Pershing missiles have been stationed between USA and Soviet Union. This treaty made it obligatory for both sides that they don't use certain missile categories. These categories, range categories from 500 to 1,000 kilometers, and also medium range from 1,000 to 5,500 kilometers. So these were forbidden. And also testing these systems were forbidden. The end of the INF Treaty under Trump, 2019, and the development of the hypersonic Dark Eagle are directly linked strategically and also in time. The Dark Eagle hypersonic rocket has been developed 2009, or began to develop 2019, exactly the time when the INF Treaty was gotten rid of, and it will have a range of 2,800 to 3,500 kilometers. As long as the INF Treaty was in place, those land-based missiles would have been forbidden. Dark Eagle, with its range, again 2,800 to 3,500, would have been in this category of the INF Treaty and wouldn't have been developed, made it possible to develop it. So the USA began right after the INF Treaty was kicked by USA, they developed it. And so far only in Germany is it planned to be stationed. The development of Dark Eagle and the end of INF Treaty, it's based on many strategic ideas by the USA. A central reason for the US to walk out of the INF Treaty was that only Russia and USA are bound by it, but China not. China has developed its arsenal. USA has been bound by the treaty. So Trump administration argued that because China is developing, this is threatening the USA, and therefore they walk away from the treaty. Dark Eagle has two strategic core tasks. First, it can target deep strike capabilities by Russia and destroy them before they can fire on NATO territory. Second, it's possible that the Mach 17 velocity makes it possible to eliminate mobile command structures deep into Russia. From London, it can strike Moscow, or from Guam, it can attack the Chinese mainland. It's the nuclear option is being made possible by that, so that a nuclear war can be fought without the USA being threatened by nuclear strikes. From American territory, they think will be out of danger. by that.
Eine weitere dramatische Zäsur in Richtung Atomkrieg.
Another dramatic development in direction of nuclear war
Also ab 2026
is what Biden and Scholz
stationieren, was bisher eigentlich
decided
ausgeklammert
to
wurde.
only station
Regulare Vorgehen
these
hier in Europa.
types on German
Und
ground.
nur Deutschland zu instrumentieren, hat Deutschland bisher eigentlich
And
immer vermeiden können. Nur jetzt nicht mehr.
which Germany could have avoided in the past, but now it cannot.
So, und diese Stationierung der Dark
And
Eagle
this stationing of Dark
war dem
Eagle
Nachrüstungsbeschluss von vor 45 Jahren gleich. Wenn auch er da viel
is
dramatischer
is very similar to
Damals
the
fasste der
NATO
Beschluss, hier die neuen Mittelstreckenraketen
idea 45 years ago, when they said that cruise missile systems and Pershing have been stationed. Pershing has been nuclearly capable, also with hardened explosives, missile heads, so that bunkers deep under the surface could have been destroyed. It was very precise, and the idea was that to use this as a decapitation system. The idea was to have this as a nuclear first strike capacity. Since the INF Treaty, this weapon doesn't exist anymore, but now it's much more dangerous. In a few weeks only, the New START Treaty will be over, which is the last treaty to limit atomic weapons between USA and Russia, which will be on the 26th of February 2026, is absolutely linked to the new stationing of these missiles. The Russian stationing of Oreshnik in Belarus will also be shortly after the 26th February 2026. And parallel to that, new weapon systems, Tomahawk, SM-6, and will be stationed also in Wiesbaden and Grafenwöhr and will be mobile. The bilateral declarations because New START will be ended end of February. This will be the last strategic limitation between Russia and USA. The first Dark Eagle battery was brought into service, is already ready to fire. New reports say that Dark Eagle will be delivered, so that Russia and China will have a big will face a big danger in this year. So the end of New START and the stationing of Dark Eagle marks a fundamental break in the strategic stability. Without treaty-bound limitations, both sides will develop much more weapon systems. The hypersonic weapon, Dark Eagle, is threatening the strategic balance between the West and Russia much more than any weapon systems before, and also with China. The danger of this stationing are the following. First, it's the danger of escalation. because only a few minutes will be the warning time. Mützenich from the SPD warned that because of this extremely short warning time is a big danger. Tomahawk, because they are fly so low, can be seen very late by radars. This permanent alarm situation can lead to mistakes on both sides. Germany is now the primary battlefield. Central Europe and also Germany, especially, will be the battlefield in case of conflict. Sigmar Gabriel, former foreign minister, emphasized this danger. Said if the stationing would happen, Germany would be attacked in case of danger. And the reaction of Russia, which could be to station nuclear weapons, will actually make it much more dangerous for Germany. Russia has already announced concrete countermeasures and already realized some of them. The Russian Foreign Ministry announced officially the end to limit their land-based missiles, and by pointing to the US development. Putin, during the NATO summit, already announced Russian countermeasures. Russia already deployed or stationed Oreshnik systems in Belarus, and they are part of a direct answer to the Dark Eagle development. The defense minister of Belarus said explicitly, this is our answer to the aggressive actions by the West. On the 2nd October 2024, the Schill Institute had a Zoom conference, a next step towards the nuclear Armageddon. Jack Matlock was invited, former ambassador to Moscow, but also Ted Postel, one of the best experts of nuclear war and how they are being used. Before
Mr. Effenberger, just because we have a couple other people in line, could you just take maybe 2 more minutes, and then we'll definitely come back. There's going to be lots of questions and discussion.
Ich bin sofort fertig. Ja, ich habe es ja auch gleich. Ich wollte ja nur noch an dieses Ereignis am 2. Oktober 24
I'm almost done. I just wanted to remind to this conference, the Zoom conference by the Schill Institute, and I also was present. The scientist Theodor Postel said that Russia has no chance to defend itself against these new systems, but they only can strike with nuclear weapons in Germany. This has been a year ago, but the development has been furthered, and our politicians just further that development. It cannot be understood, and therefore this conference is so important, and I thank you very much that I could speak here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Effenberger. Your presentation and what you've gone through very thoroughly is very important, and I think that we should definitely take some clips from what you've gone through and use in our various organizing. I can guarantee the German participants are going to be very eager to use this. Thank you very much for your analysis and what you're presenting to us here today. Okay, so we shall continue, and then we will absolutely, we will be having more discussion after the fact, so please stay tuned. Next, we will go to Beto Armida of Brazil. He's the co-founder of Telesur and the advisory board and the Brazilian Press Association. Thank you so much for joining us, Beto, Mr. Armida. Please go ahead, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Muy buenas tardes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My greetings and, of course, congratulations to everyone on this new year. Thank you for the invitation. I believe that we're living in a situation which is extremely dangerous, as if we were dancing at the edge of a nuclear precipice and we're not aware of this. There are some sectors that express aspects or fragments of this reality and try to deal with it. This is the situation with the Schiller Institute, but there is a very great oscillations of the behavior of the large countries that are in a position to adopt policies that are the decisive factor in all of this. We're talking about the United States, we're talking about the Russian Federation, and the case of China, and also Europe as a distinct bloc. We have four foci, as we are all aware, all of which are very dangerous. That of Ukraine, which is perhaps the most explosive one of all, with the possibility of bringing about the most destructive, the broadest consequences, the most destructive ones, the situation of Gaza, Middle East, Iran, which once again is a target of threats coming from Donald Trump, which he already attacked Donald Trump last year without declaring war, without any declaration of war. Now, once again, the situation is heating up of the third scenario, which is Taiwan, with the election of the right-winger Takaichi in Japan, who brings back nostalgia over Japanese militarism. When the world has changed decisively, it's completely impossible for Japan to be able today to offer any kind of an alternative, let alone a military alternative, to address the Taiwan dilemma. Additionally, because the words of President Xi Jinping are quite clear, that reunification of Taiwan with China is inevitable, and with everything that that means. And then we have a surprising presence of Vladimir Putin, who said that also the Russian Federation would express its solidarity with China under any conditions of a positive effort by the United States or Japan or Australia with regard to Taiwan. In fact, there are some islands in the area which are under Russia's sovereignty. And Putin said that he could also establish certain defensive military instruments to defend Taiwan under the conditions of respect for China's sovereignty. And the fourth point now is Venezuela. But Venezuela, with that, is we have a threat to the entire Caribbean, especially after the new strategic document was launched, the new strategic summary document, which was answered within a few days by a Chinese document towards Latin America and the Caribbean, where it seems that humanity is losing opportunities one after the other. We're losing opportunities. The situation is getting complicated because we are not taking into account the risks which we are facing. For example, when we saw the disintegration of the Soviet Union, despite all of the promises that there would not be any expansion of NATO, it was exactly that which did happen. All of the area of Comecon, the Warsaw Pact, all of them became, almost all of them, provinces of NATO. That is to say, NATO reserve areas. And that means to fail to fulfill the promises which were expressed, which were made to President Vladimir Putin himself. And he made it very clear at one point that even he was proposing that Russia itself could become a member of NATO in order to avoid the danger of war. And now, after all that, yet again, once again, we have the violation of these agreements after the Maidan coup in 2014 with direct United States involvement, direct self-confessed intervention, as Victoria Nuland said. She admitted it, unabashedly admitted this intervention. After all of that, the Russian Federation waited for a long time with quite some patience and with some internal sectors in Russia saying, not really patiently, but with some ingenuity, they were ingenious to try to reach certain agreements with the West, but ultimately the Minsk agreement, which failed after 14,000 deaths of Russians in the Donbas region. And it failed with a pathetic, shameful confession by Angela Merkel, who reached the point of stating openly that this was all just theater. They were just putting on a show. After all of that, from the Russian side, they accepted the statement of resistance from the Russian population in some of these provinces with a vote and then with a right to self-defense, military self-defense. This is a right because there were, after all, 14,000 deaths. And they, in various referenda, from Crimea to Donetsk and others, and now they what is being posed today is that these be somehow returned to Ukraine. This is completely unrealistic, as absurd as we are once again losing the opportunity where we have certain dialogues that have been opening. The most difficult and most important of all, direct dialogue of Putin and Trump, which expressed various evaluations that there were very concrete advances that were made towards some concrete agreements, a real agreement, not only for a ceasefire, but also an agreement to bring about a definitive peace. After all of that, we see at least 3 terrorist attacks to kill high-level generals of the Russian military in Moscow. In Moscow. They were assassinated in Moscow. And now we have the attack on the residence of Vladimir Putin. But even graver than that is the attempt to deny that this actually occurred. There's a level of cynicism which indicates the level of lack of seriousness with which the political situation is being discussed, because to argue that there was no such thing, that this was just fake news. And yesterday, 2 days ago, in a restaurant in Kherson. An incendiary bomb was intentionally an incendiary bomb was launched to kill 24 people. It was a restaurant which killed civilians. It was not a military barracks. There were no military men there. It was a restaurant where they were carrying out New Year's celebrations. And they died because civilians, children, were celebrating the New Year. What does that tell us? This is a level of degeneration of thinking, which establishes the deliberate attempt to sabotage the agreements. There are circles, powerful circles in Europe who are very fearful, very concerned, but who are very afraid of losing the very profitable military contracts. And for that reason, they backed Ukraine in the war against Russia. And these circles of NATO are still committed to this. And for that reason, they are backing deliberately the most violent actions of Ukraine against the Russian Federation, which clearly provokes a reevaluation, a rethinking, as President Putin put it, over how to deal with the conversations, the efforts to establish an agreement towards a more definitive solution in Ukraine. That solution clearly can't accept that Ukraine will enter NATO, that now the territory would be returned to them, because there was already a popular expression by a popular vote in those areas, not just a military advance. This is something that's very concrete, because the military attack, which began in 2014 against the Russian population in the Donbass, left no option other than to take a military attack in turn. You cannot respond to a military attack with flowers and niceties. This had the support, pretty much the total support, and the Obama administration and then the Biden administration had totally supported these atrocities. Now with Trump, there is a change, at least an effort to do that, because there is a serious attempt to carry out a respectful, serious dialogue, and with a working plan, which many people want to sabotage. These attacks, the death of the high-level generals, the high-ranking generals, are designed to create an insecurity that this whole policy of negotiation will not go ahead. That's what they're trying to do, because war produces a lot of money for certain sectors. But it's important to make it known that the media don't always communicate. Media tied to the war machine, that news that they don't want to advise people about. For example, the suspension of U.S. weaponry into Ukraine. That's a fact. That's true. They also stopped or reduced or cut off the sending of money from the United States to Ukraine. So these sectors, I would say, are somewhat desperate, because this means to change their plans, such as the plans mentioned by the previous speaker, such as the establishment of missiles in Germany targeting Russia. All of those plans are changed if the United States does not participate in it. So we have a situation which is truly very difficult. It's big change, but look, Russia wants to have a dialogue with the United States. China wants and has made cooperation proposals towards the United States. In fact, even, and this was surprising, to include for China to include the United States within the Belt and Road Initiative. This seems almost incredible, but it's true. That proposal was made, and this provokes a series of people in Latin America are disconcerted because, in a very serious way, a very concrete way, both the Russian Federation as well as China are advising Donald Trump to not carry out war against Venezuela, which is another point in this battle. Don't do it. Don't do it. Let's reach some sort of cooperation, which for the Chinese requires an almost supernatural proposal, a cooperation. They talked about trilateral cooperation. This is truly, Brazil itself has trouble understanding this, because even though Brazil has become as the major trade partner of China in Latin America, and China is also the major trade partner for Brazil, overpassing the United States, which has always historically been the number one. At the same time, this means that Brazil has to offer and present policies in foreign policy which are more concrete, which is more emphatic with relation to Venezuela, with relationship to the integration of the Latin American countries, not just speeches, because at this time, China has just cut off a large part of exports that Brazil's meat to China. This is not a trade matter. This is a political signal from China that Brazil could be more effective, that Brazil should not forget that politically is the president of the BRICS. It's not any old country, and that it can do more to establish constructive basis for cooperation, which is not simple, but for this kind of trilateral cooperation. And that it's from this standpoint, we can look at all of the different points of conflict danger with relationship to Venezuela and Latin America, which Trump and the sectors which are pressuring him, they don't want him to move away from war, because there are sectors that want to move forward in a more direct fashion around Venezuela. But at the moment, Trump has to calculate that Donald Trump is negotiating with Xi Jinping as well as Putin, and that he invited, or rather accepted, the Xi Jinping's invitation to go to China. This is a political message. This is not it's just a visit. Also, because we know that it's precisely China that has in its hands a large part of the treasury bonds, the treasury debt of the United States, one of the largest in the world. This is quite significant. What should China's behavior be? Because there are many sectors within the United States which don't see the possibility of a recovery in the United States, a reindustrialization, and are becoming more hysterically violent with regard to the entire world. But it's also possible to discuss a return to the policies of the arsenal of democracy, such as Franklin Delano Roosevelt's policies. This is very important because the policies have changed since Roosevelt's time until today in a central way. I think that one of the subjects which perhaps, with the authority which the Schiller Institute has, because it's precisely in Europe, there are big policy or political complications, not only because of what was just said, that would be the principal target of an attack if there were a nuclear war, but also there's an anti-NATO movement which could adopt the policy, but unfortunately, a part of that movement has a policy of equating the United States and Russia as if they were both bad, while in reality there's an attitude of Russia with regard to many of the countries of Latin America, such as Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, or Sahel in Africa, Iran, and similarly China, increasingly cooperating with Russia in the Sahel, in Latin America, in Cuba, and in Venezuela, and also Nicaragua, that would make it possible to establish a broad discussion for the reform of that policy, which views both as equal, as both dangerous, the US and Russia. Because as if the threat came from Moscow, when the reality is that Moscow is being attacked. By ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I think to establish a broad discussion, to establish big symposia in Europe, because that's a source of, there's a lot of lack of understanding there. I think this would be quite interesting to do that. And with this, I would conclude that there's a recent phrase when Trump got a phone call from Moscow to explain the attack which had just occurred against the Putin's residence, where people said it wasn't true. And Trump's response on that phone call was, thank God we did not supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. I wasn't present, but at least that's how it was reported. That's how it was described. But this is highly significant of what could happen if a different approach were to prevail in Washington. It's highly significant that it shows an attitude of provide continuance to the policy of the constructive policies that were established at the summit meeting in Alaska. So we have to bet on that alternative, because the other one would be to awaken even inside Russia as well, because there are other tendencies there. And one of them is that of, for example, Sergei Karaganov, just as there is talk of establishing missiles in Alemania. Karaganov has written various articles, and he has a lot of prestige, a lot of articles where he says that the West needs to return to have fear, and it's perhaps necessary to launch some sort of a warning through an actual preventive attack, a preemptive message. That indicates the gravity of what we're facing. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Beto. That was very useful and important, I think, to express a lot of the things that you have put on the table today. Thank you so much for that. And this particular point you made at the end really struck me, that thank God they didn't supply the Tomahawk missiles. I think that is absolutely true, and it should be a lesson learned for many other nations who are considering arming Ukraine at this point. I want to go to Helga Zepp-LaRouche and to start off our discussion with the panel before we continue. Please go ahead, Helga.
Well, first of all, let me thank both speakers, Mr. Effenberger and Mr. Almeida, for your extremely important contributions, which I think all converge on an agreement that we are really looking at a very short time perspective where this whole thing could go completely out of control. I think just the thinking about the Dark Eagle deployment, I mean, once that is reached, I cannot see how the Russians cannot react. Because if you are in a responsible military command position, I mean, it would always be almost be reckless for Russia to allow the deployment of this to occur, because once these missile systems are there, they could take out the Russian strategic reaction force. So they almost are obliged to preemptively act. And I know of some military circles in European countries who are sort of halfway joking, halfway cynically saying, you know, if the Russians only send the Oreshniks, we are in good shape. And if they go nuclear, we are in bad shape, you know, but thinking that it will be between those two. And, you know, the thing which is so absolutely disconcerting is I remember in the beginning of the 80s, when there was the middle range missile crisis, there were hundreds of thousands of people in the streets who were completely aware that we were on the verge of World War III. I was in part some of these demonstrations participating, and I know people took it extremely serious that, you know, we were on the verge of World War III. And even Helmut Schmidt, in his position as a chancellor, was warning publicly about that danger. And now you have a situation where the leaders of European governments of the so-called coalition of the willing, and actually the Brussels EU Commission, are talking as if this would just not be I mean, it's almost incomprehensible how you can orchestrate a policy which is a dance on the apocalyptic volcano, you know, and anything could go wrong. And I think the factor of miscalculation is becoming larger and larger. And you remember the crazy statements about Kaliningrad, which is being talked about now as if it was just that it would be an attack on the Russian Federation fully, and the Russians have said so. Also, you know, the fact that the warnings of Karaganov are not taken serious. If you don't take that serious, you know, I mean, I may not agree with the tactic of that you have to put fear into people but you know, he reacts to a situation which obviously means that there is a complete detachment of the reality of where the strategic situation is, and you know what these policies will lead to, as if there would be a schizophrenia, as some kind of a disconnect. And I think the only chance we have is that we will try to present what both of you presented to a larger audience. So I'm really calling on all participants in this call, use the clips about these statements and circulate them widely in your social media lists, in other connections you may have, get other podcasters to co-stream it, because if people are not aware of this, we may end civilization and most people don't even notice it. And, you know, what a tragedy would that be for humanity? I mean, I always keep thinking about all the beautiful scientific discoveries mankind made, the beautiful pieces of art, the compositions of Beethoven and many other composers. All would be in vain because there would be nobody left to even question what happened. And for me, that is an unbearable thought. And I think the only thing we can do is to try our maximum to get this changed and put the new security and development architecture seriously on the table.
Thank you, Helga. And I'd like to invite both you, Mr. Almeida, and Mr. Effenberger, if you have any reflections or thoughts or comments from the discussion so far. I see Dennis Small. Of course, you're invited to speak.
But no, I'll wait a moment in case either Mr. Almeida or Mr. Effenberger would like to say something. Okay. A number of commentators have stated, such as Scott Ritter, that, and I think accurately, that the Ukrainian drone attack on the presidential residence in Volgorod fulfills all of the requirements under Russian nuclear doctrine for a Russian nuclear response. It is quite clear from the evidence presented that the United States government knew perfectly well, or portions of it, what was going on. Tracking is available. It is also quite clear from the statements of numerous experts that these kinds of attacks with these kinds of sophisticated capabilities could not have occurred by Kiev alone. And from inside Russia in particular, but also Western sources, at the highest level in Russia, they are repeatedly pointing the finger at London, London's direct role on Kiev. Now, under these circumstances, where the explicit policy of a faction in the West is to take the world up to and over the threshold of nuclear warfare, we really need to think this thing through. The problem of mutually assured destruction, which has been the policy going back decades, and it's most associated with Henry Kissinger, depends on the opponent force responding with at least a modicum of sanity to the threat of nuclear extinction. It's the idea that if you proceed, the world is going to blow up. And that modicum of sanity on which mutually assured destruction depends is no longer present. The problem with Mr. Karaganov's proposal, which Beto Almeida referred to and Helga as well, that what Europe and the West needs now is something to scare the pants off them. The problem with that proposal is that it depends on the logic of mutually assured destruction. And I think it is clearly the case that we are no longer in a world strategic situation where that can conceivably function. The people on the other side in NATO do not care. And they are prepared, as they have shown, and as they state explicitly, that they think they can win a nuclear exchange. So we're in a situation which I think we can compare to what Lyndon LaRouche often referred to as a phase change. It's a little like a physical phase change where water, when it's heated, first becomes hot water and hotter water, but then it stops being water. It becomes steam. And different laws prevail. We are today beyond the point where mutually assured destruction can work. The only thing that it will do is take us more quickly to a thermonuclear confrontation. So we are forced necessarily, and I think this latest development of this week should force our rethinking of the nature of the strategic situation, that we are, this pun may not work in other languages, we're not in hot water. We're in steam. And therefore, the only thing that will work is the kind of proposal which Lyndon LaRouche made back in 1983 and much earlier, of achieving a policy of cooperation with Russia, but now also with China, where technological advances could be jointly developed to render existing nuclear warheads obsolete. It's a way of banishing nuclear weapons. But the crucial element on this is cooperation of East and West. And that is at the center of what Helga Zepp-LaRouche has been repeatedly proposing and is the centerpiece of our discussions here. So I wanted to refer to this because I think we have to make it clear, each of us in our respective countries and with the groups that we talk to, that we have, with the new year in 2026, gone through a fundamental change, and people cannot think
in the domain of hot water. We have to develop the concepts for changing the world in the domain of steam.
Thank you, Dennis. I see that Mr. Effenberger, you had your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Mhm. Ja, danke sehr. Also das war jetzt schon mal sehr zielführend, aber wir sind von einer Kooperation, einer
Yeah, thank you very much.
noch so weit
That was
Jahre entfernt.
very interesting, but we are light years away from a real cooperation. Since 10 years, every trust has been by the West has been eliminated. Every trust. We need measures to rebuild the trust. When we even want peace or only a cessation of hostilities, then only this can happen when trust is there. And to go this way, it's necessary that Washington does not station these 3 weapon systems. If that does not happen, I don't think that anything will work.
Thank you. Mr. Almeida, I saw your hand was raised as well.
Sí, sí, queria agregar pequeno comentário. Esse tema do ataque preventivo não é de hoje, não?
The topic about
Es un
the
tema de
preventive attack,
64, Che Guevara
we
y
saw it
Mao
in
Zedong,
with Che Guevara
y discutieron el tema,
in the past,
donde
and
consideraron
he
que si la guerra
spoke
era
with
inevitable,
Mao
debería
Zedong, and they
establecer un tipo
spoke about
de
if
ataque
the war
preventivo,
was,
assim,
if there was some
compreendendo como
type
impulso
of
a
preventive
processos
attack,
revolucionários,
and
não
they
somente
understood it
pensados.
was an impulse of the
Pero isso lhe custou a
revolutionary
Che
process,
Guevara,
not
cayó
only
en desgracia
something military,
perante
but the
la Unión Soviética. Entonces fue considerado un aventurero,
but
pasó a ser
he was
seguido por
considered an adventurer,
la
and then the
KGB.
KGB was
Puede haber
investigating
custado
him,
incluso la propia vida.
and it could have
O sea, é tema que
cost
retorna,
him
pero
his
ahora o
life.
caso es mucho más
So
difícil,
now
mucho más
we
amargo,
have a more
mucho más
difficult
peligroso
situation,
para la
more
humanidad.
difficult for
Pero que viene
humanity.
de China
But
exatamente una
what comes
especie
from China
de luz,
exactly is a
porque não é
is
uma
a type
propuesta
of
de
light,
cooperação
because it's not
para
not
allá,
only a proposal
más
of
allá
cooperation
de uma
to,
definição
but
ideológica
it
como
goes
um ou
beyond
outro país.
a
Por
ideological
exemplo, se algum
definition
país
for one
capitalista
country or
aceita
another. If
cooperar
one
com China para
capitalist
projetos
country
de
accept the
infraestrutura,
cooperation with
economia,
China for
China ali
projects of
não lhe
economy and
pergunta como é
infrastructure, China is
el
not
color
asking
del
what
gas,
is the color.
não lhe pergunta
The
qual é su
the
bandeira ideológica.
it doesn't
Está haciendo
ask what is
cooperação
their
com
ideology.
Perú
Is
e havia
collaborating
ali
with
com
Peru,
Dina Boluarte
with Dina
governo
Boluarte,
bastante
who had a government that was
questionável, não? Que cooperou, incluso atuou
that
para
cooperated
copiar el presidente legitimamente electo, Pedro Castillo.
that
Pero de
that
toda maneira, hoje el
that
maior
came in
esforço
to replace President
naval
Castillo,
de
but now Navalde
América Latina Pacífico está
in
em Perú.
he is in Peru,
Pero la
in
idea
Chancay,
necesita
but the
una serie de
idea
outros e outros
needs
acordos, niveles de acordos
several
que
agreements and a level of
completamente
agreements
diferente de
that
buscar
is
una preparación
totally
militar.
different than
Es una
looking for
preparación
a
de otra mirada
military
del mundo.
preparation.
Y también
Is another type of
se
situation.
propone para algunos
And
países europeos la iniciativa
and if
Ciclón
they
26,
and if China proposes the Belt and Road Initiative for
posibilidad de que
European
países de
countries,
Europa puedan
there
participar.
is a possibility that
Entonces,
countries in
isso
Europe could
significa
participate. So
¿qué
that
quiere hoy la Federación Rusa?
what the
Establecer
Russians want,
su defensa, su
they want to
soberanía,
establish
no
their
seguir
defense and
siendo
sovereignty.
acosada, ¿no?
They don't want to continue
Por isso
being
tiene
attacked,
mucha
And because of that, Russia has a lot of cooperation and understanding with China, when in the past they didn't have this cooperation when they were so-called socialists, and now they are not called that. At least the Russian Federation is not declaring itself socialist. It continued to be, but it has a cooperation and an economic integration and energetic integration with China. In that way, it can be, it could be, and if it has those tendencies that it wants to promote the war, the surprise is that in this moment, the White House is not in that line. In this moment, is dangerous because John Kennedy, when he didn't want to continue the escalation in Vietnam, knowing that there were other factors, it was dangerous. But we only have the political recourse to have a discussion of ideas. And so in some circles, how this dimension of danger, humanity is not aware that this is happening, but at the same time, because there is a control of the media on the ideas necessary for the world, as the document, as we have proposed to have a new architecture for humanity, we have to insist with a lot of patience, but with initiative, to have a situation, because the movements, the universities, the parties, the political parties could understand that we can have a change of position. The governments can listen that we need a change. They can understand that we need the necessity to act and to search an agreement for the whole humanity. If we have the birth of BRICS, that means that there is the idea that we cannot ignore the other possibility. It's not the vision, the unipolar vision of destroying everything, but the idea that is looking to incorporate, independently of what is the ideology, is an effort to have another world economy with more cooperation, and in that we can have the peace. Otherwise, it won't be possible.
Gracias, Mr. Almeida. Helga? Oops. There we go.
Yes, I think we should think about launching from this session of the IPC meeting several initiatives, because it is very clear that what Mr. Effenberger said about that the US could discontinue the installment of these missiles, and maybe President Trump would want to not continue the policy of the previous administration, the Biden administration. You remember when the Biden administration came to an end, the view in the Pentagon was, according to qualified sources, that there was a likelihood of 50% that it would end up in a nuclear war over Ukraine, which, I mean, imagine to even have such a discussion shows you that, we are really out of whack. So why don't we formulate a proposal from the IPC to President Trump, and then have the entire members of the IPC, both the present discussion but also previous sessions, and that we ask them to go into an international mobilization of all IPC components to, direct this letter to President Trump, that he should, discontinue the policy of the Biden administration and stop these missiles. Then I have a second proposal, and that is, if you think about the strategic situation from the top, not bound by difficulties or national borders or whatever, but if you think, where are forces of sanity, and how can we put these forces of sanity together? Well, what comes to mind naturally is the fact that the Global Governance Initiative, together with the Global Security Initiative coming from Xi Jinping, in my view, is on the government level the only comprehensive strategic proposal how to move to a new paradigm, how to leave the logic of MAD and the present geopolitical confrontation, and how go to the concept what Xi Jinping otherwise always calls the shared future of the one humanity, which is the concept of one humanity first. So that for sure is an element. And then, as we discussed at previous IPC meetings, the fact that the Pope Leo XIV used the speech at the Jubilee year to evoke the method of Nicolaus of Cus in his coincidence of opposite, which, given the fact that I, since about 4 decades, have been using the coincidence of opposite as a method of conflict resolution, because Nicolaus of Cus developed this idea that the one is of a higher order than the many, and actually he came to that conclusion through a theological discussion. But I have found that the method of thinking of overcoming Aristotelian conflicts on a lower level by establishing the one concept which elevates the whole conflict to a different plane is applicable to political situations. And I'm absolutely convinced that the Peace of Westphalia would not have been possible without the Cusanus thinking of the coincidence of opposite. So what is if we try to make a real serious effort to combine these two approaches, the Global Governance Initiative and the coincidence of opposite method mentioned by the Pope, and that we appeal to all of these followers of one or the other. In the case of Xi Jinping, it's the BRICS, the SCO, the Global South, the Global Majority. In the case of Pope Leo XIV, it's obviously all Catholics, but also other religions are respecting the Pope as a spiritual leader of outstanding character. Because we have to catapult in a seemingly hopeless situation a mixture of forces together which has enough power to do exactly what we are calling for, namely to put the idea of a new security and development architecture seriously on the table. And we have to somehow put together all forces who are of goodwill, hopefully also in powerful positions like Xi Jinping, like the Pope, and whatever they represent, and that we really try to make that happen.
Thank you, Helga. I was just thinking about how to get this proposal across. Maybe what we can do is we can formulate, get a few of us together, and if people are really excited and interested in helping to formulate it, please reach out. I'll make sure to include my email in the Zoom meeting. But we can come up with a proposal and then put it forward and send it out to the IPC participants and get people's responses before it goes public, so we get a general consensus amongst the group. Does that sound good? Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very good proposal. I'll just quickly, I'll go to Beto, if you have any response to Helga's initiative or any other thoughts before we continue to the discussion period with the audience.
Oh, apenas agregaria que esse documento fora también destinado
I
a
think
todos
that
los líderes que hoy tienen un
a
papel
document
muy
should be
decisivo en esta
addressed to all of the leaders who are
transición.
playing
Será
a
Donald Trump, sí,
leading
pero
a role,
que lo
that is
sepa
Donald Trump, yes,
exactamente
but
Xi
this should
Jinping
also be
y
known by
Vladimir
Xi
Putin,
Jinping,
las
Vladimir Putin, the
personalidades,
Pope, that is
porque creo que
world
nosotros podemos ser de ese
leaders,
documento
because we
junto a
could
universidades,
uh,
partidos y
distribute this
democracias,
document to
algo que nos dé
universities,
a
political parties, trade
movimiento
unions, something that
de
could
ideas para
be
encontrar
a
otros proyectos, otra
a basis for a movement of ideas and to launch a new project.
I think that's also a good idea, definitely. We should do that. Okay, well, thank you very much. Please stay on. We'll continue the discussion with the general audience. We're going to make the transition and bring some of the people on from the various platforms into the Zoom meeting. So I'll make this announcement right now. If you're on over YouTube, Rumble, Twitter X, or whatever other platform this is being broadcast over, and you would like to participate during the discussion period with the panelists today and the rest of the participants, you must be registered to get the link. You can do that by going to the YouTube description, and there is a link directly to go to the RSVP page. If you're not over YouTube, you can go to schillerinstitute.com, and right on the top of the website is the RSVP link. Just register, and you will be emailed the Zoom link to hop on. And with that, Dave, let me know